Also note that the meeting is being audio and video recorded. Members of the committee, can I have a motion or approval of the agenda, please?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor, Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Abby DiMolina,
Aye.
Bernie Husser,
Aye.
Leslie Snell,
Aye.
Chantal Blois Murphy,
Aye.
Brian Turbot is an aye. I'll open it to public comment for anything not on the agenda. I don't believe there's any members of the public, so we'll close that. We're here to begin the process of evaluating affirmative investments proposals. There are two proposals, 1 and 2 for Orange Street, Bartlett Road, and Vesper Lane development. I would note that because our OpenGov software doesn't have the capability to accept multiple proposals and individual offerings, you did submit 2 proposals within the same request. There is a way for us to separate them into 2 independent proposals. That has not fully been completed at this time. So members of the committee, we do have to score both of these proposals independent of each other since they are 2 completely different proposals and do provide for different funding mechanisms. My office, Deputy Procurement Officer Cindy Sue, is actually taking the second proposal, which I think is labeled LIHTC proposal, and separating that into a second procurement ability and putting it into that so that we can separate these. I think today the main focus will be on proposal 1, and then we most likely will need a second meeting anyway, just because of the depth of the proposal that proposal 1 and proposal 2 that were submitted. I wanted to, before we get into the proposal, have a discussion with the committee to kind of get your opinion or feel on how we wanted the rest of this evaluation to go. As you all know, it is a public requirement under Chapter 30B, Section 16 for disposition of real estate. All meetings have to be public for this, and evaluations must be conducted in public. My thought in looking at the proposals was it was likely going to take at least 2 meetings to do. The proposals were really in depth on both of them. I thought that it would be a good idea for the committee to at least start discussing the proposals. And if the committee was more strongly in favor or thought one proposal was a little bit better than the other, then that might be the proposal that we have affirmative investments make a presentation on. But I thought that from my perspective, it was better to start kind of getting into the proposals and having a discussion before we had a presentation on the proposals. And then if there's one that we're leaning more strongly to, then I think that would be where we would ask for that focus to be. But I want to open it up to the discussion from the committee before we dive into the absolute review of the proposals. And I did send around all of the responses to the questions, all of the thoughtful questions that Bernie had submitted, not only the answers, but the Dropbox references as well. So that was supplemented to the proposals. So does the committee have any thoughts on how they want to proceed with the evaluations as well, or?
I mean, the proposals, other than the financing, are essentially the same. Can we discuss them at the same time? Or are we required to go through them individually?
We are required to go through them individually. So, and we are required to fill out 2 separate scorecards for them. And I don't have a separate scorecard for the other proposal yet. That hasn't been created. So, we can certainly talk about them, I think, but I think we have to, at one point when we do the actual scoring, have to talk about them independent of each other.
I think I agree that it's going to take a couple meetings. I mean, the financial part is pretty, in depth. So in order to understand that, I feel like it will be a couple meetings anyways.
And we have, to that point, Tracy, we have sent everything off to Hilltop Securities, who we use as our financial advisor. They have an affordable housing unit that has guided both developers and municipalities through numerous deals for affordable housing, and they will do an extensive review and come back with observations and potentially even some additional questions. And at the point where we're really, I think, at that point, at one point in the process, we will likely invite them to a meeting to give their overview. We also are very fortunate to have Bernie Husser, who Christy and I have had the opportunity to work with on one very big deal that is in the works. And Bernie is a great resource and has a tremendous knowledge in affordable housing. So I think we're ahead of the game, but just as everybody knows, any deal that the town does that may involve any type of financing, bond council requires us to have Hilltop Securities Affordable Housing Component Division weigh in on the viability and to bond council before we can proceed with it. So that's why we do use that component of the company, because bond is a requirement of bond council.
I think for both for both of those reasons, Brian, what you suggest about getting a bit more detail, work through a couple of issues, and then focus on one proposal in terms of a presentation makes the most sense for the town and also for Affirmative.
Okay.
As Tracy said, it's complex. It'd be good to have Hilltop weighing in on that aspect of it. And we can clarify some items to discuss.
Okay, so we just want to dive into proposal one and start, unless anybody has any objections. Wow, this is a great committee to work with. This is really good. I'm excited.
Yes.
So the way this process works, I know I've worked with some of you on evaluative processes, not only in disposition, but in other, is we go through all the evaluative criteria. In Massachusetts, we're required, there's not a point system. We have to rank them highly advantageous, not advantageous, unacceptable on a certain set of evaluative criteria. Not only do we have to define what ranking we give it, but we also have to attach a rationale or a reasoning to that. So it can be as in-depth or as to the point as you want it to be, but we can go around and discuss each of the evaluative criteria rankings. If there are questions, I know during this process, I typically have, somebody's ranking and their discussion points have generated a question. So that's certainly, I believe that all of the individuals from Affirmative, if we have a question during the process, they're here, and if they can't answer it, they'll get back to us on an answer. So it is an opportunity. If you hear something from somebody's observation that generates a question, you're free to ask that question too as well amongst the committee, or if it's something that Affirmative can answer, then we can direct it to them as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the committee and evaluative criteria number one, which was demonstrates the capacity to develop the parcels at Orange Street, Vesper Lane, and Bartlett Road. And the proposals submitted include plans for all three parcels. And it does not matter to me what order we go in. So anyone can jump in and start. Don't all go at once.
Okay. I think their proposal was highly advantageous. They submitted proposals for the three projects as described in the RFP. They demonstrated that, through other examples of their work, that they seem to have the ability to, fulfill the obligations and to build a product that we are looking for.
Do you need each of us to provide our comments or just
Yes.
Okay, because Leslie touched on everything that I agree with.
This is Bernie. I I agree as well. And those are, I think the criteria, they certainly met the criteria. I had it as highly advantageous as well.
Same. I don't have anything new to add, but this is also my first time doing it, so I didn't necessarily have something to compare it to, but I felt like it was a very comprehensive response to the RFP for what it's worth. I've seen some that aren't like that in real life.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, again, my first go around at this, but it far, exceeded my expectations in that, so.
And I agree as well. I think it is highly advantageous. I think it was well put together, professional, and did have all the criteria.
I also scored it as highly advantageous. I think that the proposal was very thoughtfully done. It did submit plans, development plans for all three parcels, which was asked in the criteria. It demonstrated a really in-depth level of knowledge of the sites in the proposals. And I thought it demonstrated a capability and a capacity to develop the parcels in a very thoughtful way, and I think in a way that the town was looking for. So I thought it was very well done in that respect. So I guess we move on to criteria number 2. Just want to make sure nobody else joined, like Dawn or Rick. Okay. Criteria 2 was developer experience and capacity of the team. Demonstrated experience and capability for designing, permitting, developing, and managing similar residential projects. Outcome of comparable projects. Demonstrated experience in securing financing for similar projects. Experience in developing energy and efficient homes. Property management experience with similar projects. The quality of the team's reputation and references, particularly in terms of its regulatory track record and ability to complete projects as proposed. Excuse me. Success in marketing approach, including affirmative fair housing marketing plans in lottery, meeting state requirements, and successful long-term management approach.
I rated this as highly advantageous. I felt like their response demonstrated a high level of success in comparable projects, and really like to see that they had done projects on Martha's Vineyard and the Cape, which is comparable to Nantucket. They also put together a team of consultants and developed a development team that had local knowledge and had been a part of other Nantucket projects as well.
Right. I'll echo what Christy said. I also gave it highly advantageous for a lot of those same reasons. I thought the resumes provided demonstrated that the team had significant educational and work experience with similar projects, all, well-qualified professionals, and it seemed to demonstrate that they could, complete the project in a cost-effective and efficient manner as well.
I hate speaking for the sake of speaking because I agree with you all, so.
Well, you can just say that if you want, Chantal, that's fine.
And I, I'm just gonna go one step below and go with advantageous. I do have a couple concerns with some areas of the team, but overall, it's a very comprehensive and well thought out choices.
I also had it as, I did have it as highly advantageous. And I thought it did meet the affordability requirements as really it's already been said, that the town has and were enumerated in the RFP, appears to comply with HLC's guidelines as were all described. So I did have it as highly advantageous. Oops. Guess I was reading the third one. Sorry. And I'm sorry, I'm on this back and forth on the computer, so I actually read that my answer for the third one, so I'm already in on the third one. I still have this as highly advantageous for the developer experience and capacity. Pretty much what, what other folks have said. And I think to the extent that there is some inexperience with the team, those are things that can be dealt with. It's been dealt with before. And I think sometimes you use some outside consultants and different things like that. But I still thought it was highly advantageous on the team.
I actually echo most of what Tracy said. I had ranked this as advantageous because I do have some concerns with some of the proposed structure of the team, given some of the town's history or past experience with some of the team. It does not in any way mean to reflect that I don't think that overall the entirety of the team would not be able to complete this project or do the project. I think that for me, some portions of the team I have some difficulty or some skepticism with. So it is a little bit more difficult for me to bring it to the highly advantageous for those reasons. Abby.
You might have stepped away for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll go to number 3, and then when Abby comes back, we can come back and get her answer on number 2 and so on. So number 3, as we go through this, and Tara and your team, I'm certainly, if you have questions, I think you certainly are free to ask them as well, as we go through this, just so you know. Affordability. So under affordability, the criterion where the proposal meets the greatest level of affordability fiscally possible. Proposal meets requirements to have all units qualify on the SHI list, and it addresses the town's desire to work to provide at least 25% affordable units, 10% of market rate units allocated to municipal employee use if approved by EOHLC. And I admit this is not my strongest suit, so I'm going to look to Christy and Bernie and others to make sure or understand where they're coming from as well as from where I read the proposal.
I gave this one a highly advantageous as well. All the units are income restricted at some level. They're all rental units and they'll all count on the SHI list.
I also rated it highly advantageous, provides a high level of affordability at all different income levels. I did note that there were requests for zoning waivers such as parking, height, and the number of 3 bedrooms. And while ideally we'd like everything to not have waivers, we also understand that those make the project viable. But I think that there might be pushback later on in the process around the number of parking spots for the number of bedrooms. And I agree with Leslie, everything is going to count on the SHI list, and that's an important aspect of the proposal.
I also rated it as highly advantageous. Pretty much as folks have said, I had mentioned that before. It does meet the affordable requirements that were set forth in the RFP in the town. As best, we can tell at this point in time, it should comply with HLC's guidelines as described. Appears that it will.
I'm back. Sorry, I think I missed one. I had to take a phone call, so I'm really sorry. But
That's okay. Number 2.
Okay, well, on this one, I also rated it highly advantageous, and I think Christy just brought up the only thing that usually ends up being something we see as an issue from a planning perspective is the parking, so no surprise there. But I did rate it highly advantageous.
What did you have for number 2, Abby?
What was it?
Number 2 was the developer experience and capacity.
Oh, yeah, I felt like I had that as highly advantageous as
Okay.
well. It seemed like they were very experienced, and what I thought was important was that they've done projects in our community and similar communities, like, here in the Vineyard and on the Cape. Like, I think it's important so they understand what our specific challenges would be.
Okay, perfect. So I'll just jump in and say, basically listening to Bernie and Christy and your observations, I did originally have it rated highly advantageous, so because I did believe that it met all of our goals and everything would be eligible for the shy list, so you confirmed where I was thinking and how I was understanding it, which is good. It means I'm actually learning and listen when I pay attention to everything you guys are saying in all of these meetings. So I think that the proposal certainly met all of the objectives when the trust put this out for affordability. So I did rank that as highly advantageous.
I also went highly advantageous on this one, for all the same reasons. I thought it was an excellent mix of, affordability, income levels, and types of units.
And I'll chime in as newbie in the corner. I did have some concerns about the requirements for the waivers, so that kind of deterred me from going into the advantageous region. And then also, actually, the next one is for later. Never mind. But yeah, that was my main concern, because I'm always worried about that as far as the affordability piece goes, affordable housing trust fund piece goes. I worry about town meeting floor often, so maybe I'm just suffering from PTSD with that, but
So what did you rate it? Did you rate it advantageous, Chantal, for number
I went really harsh.
Okay.
I did not. However, as far as the qualifications on the shy list and things like that, listening to your observations is leaning me towards the advantageous route.
Okay. Okay. I mean, we still are going to have more than one meeting, so this is just kind of a, let's talk through the proposal. If we have questions that we need addressed as well to the group, to affirmative investments as well. And as you know, we'd have another proposal to still evaluate, which really, I think likely will just come down to a different financing proposal, but so this is not going to be indicative of ultimately the final group evaluation. This is talking through where we're all landing right now as well. So number 4.
Sorry, Brian, just because you offered for the questions.
Yeah.
It would be great for us to know, especially related to the regulatory, the waivers that you guys are a little bit more concerned about. So we can start thinking about some of those issues if you're willing to share. I obviously heard parking, but I didn't know if there were any others that would be helpful for us to know about.
Anybody who had concerns with the waivers, would be great if you would kind of give a little bit more, add color to that. And so I'll give anybody who had that the opportunity to kind of mention what concerns they had. And Leslie, I'd ask you to provide some input onto that if you could as well, since you'll have the most knowledge on that.
Yeah, I'll have to refer to the proposal, but I know, for example, the Orange Street one, the parking requirements 1 space per bedroom, and you proposed 28 units with 47 bedrooms. Basically, the parking was kind of cut in half. And I think that's, something that the planning board may have a concern about. I mean, I know it's close to transit and it's close to shopping and the school and all those things. And that's a tight site. I was going to talk about that in a at the next question, but, you know, parking waivers always bring up a lot of discussion, so.
I had similar thoughts. I was more reserving it into the next bucket under permitting versus the affordability, but you know, I think when you start getting into the waivers and the particulars of each site, it becomes a little bit more challenging on the permitting end. So
The other comment I had was just the waiver on the height. And I know that looking at the Mid-Island, you know, it fits in, but we recently had this as an article at town meeting that actually got withdrawn to look at further, but it's just, don't know if there'd be the support to go up in height, and Leslie can touch on that a little bit more with HDC as well.
Yeah, I don't think you would get pushback from the planning board on the height, and that's the special permit granting authority. The planning board proposed an increase in height in this district. But the HDC, we had a different project proposed by a private developer when this was privately owned on this site, and they were unwilling to go above the 30 feet. So that, you know, may be a bit of a challenge.
Thank you all.
Okay, so moving on to number 4, which is site-specific. Number of units and permitting at Orange Street. No more than 32 units will be constructed on the property, and workforce rental housing pursuant to Nantucket zoning bylaws.
I gave that a highly advantageous. They're proposing 28 units. But as I just mentioned, you know, that's a tight site. It has an awkward shape. It has access limitations. So I think 28 units is a solid number. And, you know, back to the parking, it's a lot to fit on that site. So it's still highly advantageous.
I also rated it as highly advantageous. At first, I would have liked to see, you know, 31 units. I'm always thinking about safe harbor, and that would give us, you know, an exact year of safe harbor. But given kind of the construction timeline and other things in the pipeline, we can utilize 28 units plus other projects to get to safe harbor. I had a second comment that, and it was within Nantucket zoning bylaws.
Christy, what did you say again? Highly advantageous?
Yes.
Brian, I said the same, and I think both Christy and Leslie, like, even though theoretically, if we were able to have a little more, as Christy said, but I think knowing the environment and being on planning board, I think 28 is great if we can get it and get it approved. And I just think that even though Christy points out, like, we'd love to have more units that count towards shy, like, I just think people don't care, and it would make it detrimental to the overall proposal, would be my thought. So I put it as highly advantageous for what it's worth.
Yeah. I had actually rated it as highly advantageous. I had seen proposals for more units, and I think that 28, I as well would have liked more, just because we are focused on shy and you know, and providing housing for as many people on the island as we can. But I think when looking at this, I think 28 seemed to be a reasonable number that accomplished the goals of the Affordable Housing Trust. And I think looking at this design and comparing it to what had previously been proposed, I think this was more thoughtful and still accomplished that of the goals. So I rated it highly advantageous because of that.
I also had one other comment just to add that I really appreciated keeping the elm tree that was there,
Yes.
trying to build around that. So as I said, I originally was hoping to see more units, but keeping that tree and doing less, I think, is a more favorable outcome.
I also rated this highly advantageous, with a note that I thought permitting might be challenging. And, I do think 28 units is a nice balance. I think the 31 would have been a stretch. I do favor proposal 2 for the site over proposal 1, just saying, although I don't think that it's a significant disadvantage, I just slightly preferred the proposal 2, for the site. And I think that had, if I'm recalling, because I'm not that far down into that proposal, but I think that had to do with the ingress and egress. I think in proposal 2, maybe it loops around versus a dead end. Maybe I'm remembering that wrong, but other than that, I think it's the same with the parking. And but overall, very well done.
I also had it at highly advantageous. I didn't focus as much about any of the waivers, and I'm not as familiar physically with the site as all of you in Nantucket are. I was a little concerned with the parking, so I to have additional more units stress the parking issue as much, because that particular site is where the management office is. It's the biggest site, so there's more likely to be more traffic there in terms of deliveries or, mail, et cetera, different things. But I think they accommodated it as best they could.
Right. And just one other thing about this area is, it's a high traffic area, especially in the summer. So, anyways, I was just taking that in consideration when you're in, going in and out, thinking about that.
I had a hard time with this category just because, one, as a community member, I thought that's a lot of units. I traverse that area often throughout my day. However, thinking with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund hat on, just to have that many units added to our shy list would be huge. So I set aside my personal feelings and went with highly advantageous. Brian, can you keep an eye out for me? I have to switch devices.
Oh, yes,
you.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so we have everyone there. So now moving on to 5, which is number of units and permitting at Vesper Lane. The criterion to be evaluated on is no more than 17 units will be constructed on the property. Affordable units for residents aged 55 and above, ADA compliant, pursuant to Nantucket zoning bylaws.
So I gave this one, excuse me, I gave this one highly advantageous. They're proposing exactly 17 units. Those can be permitted as apartments under our zoning bylaw. They put in a preference for residents age 55 and older, which is what we were asking for.
I also, sorry.
I also rated it highly advantageous for the same reasons.
And ditto to what everybody just said. So yeah.
And Brian, same. I agree with Bernie, Christy, Leslie. Highly advantageous.
Yep.
Same for me. Just gonna say that. Same for me.
I actually did rate it highly advantageous, and I was actually quite impressed because I don't think I had ever seen what I know when we acquired it, what we had in mind, but I don't think I'd ever seen what the possibilities look like out there. At least I hadn't, and maybe you had, Christy, or somebody else had, but I thought it was the renderings looked really nice, and the descriptions of how they were going to do it and everything looked good. And I'm glad that we were able to, that the restriction to 55 and above was included as required. So I had it rated as highly advantageous as well. Did Chantal come back? I thought I let her in. Oh, I did.
Yes, you did. And I agree with all of you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, number 6, which is specific to Bartlett Road, says no more than 12 units will be constructed on the property and rental development pursuant to Nantucket zoning bylaws. Leslie, was this workforce housing here, or is there there's no zoning issues with this one, is there?
No, excuse me, this was the one that had the zoning minor issue.
Okay, but
Um,
it would not prevent us from proceeding, correct?
correct. So
Okay.
workforce housing, as it's defined in the zoning bylaw, cannot be permitted on the site because of the size of the lot. But you can permit apartments and achieve the same result. It's just a different way to permit it. So with that, I'll say that, 12 units could be permitted there. And that's what they've proposed. They could be rented just like we asked for and what they've proposed. I gave it highly.
They also went highly advantageous on this, with some notes on, possible permitting challenges and traffic in the area. And, but I think it's definitely a well thought out design for that many units. And, so that's it.
Brian, same. I did highly advantageous for the same reasons as my comrades have said.
I also rated it highly advantageous.
I did it as well for the same reasons.
Gosh, I feel like a broken record, but this is the first I had seen of anything here, so I was actually really, it's taken us a long time to get here with this, so it was nice to see something thoughtfully designed that met the criteria. I do have some concerns about traffic and things of that nature, relative to the location of this, but the criterion really is, did they permit 12 units or are they looking to develop 12 units, and does it fit within the Nantucket zoning bylaws, which it does. So I believe that it fits the highly advantageous criteria. Okay. Criteria 7. Site design, which goes to all of them, is although one is specific to 135, 137, which I'll note. But the site design criterion to be evaluated is thoughtful and efficient site designs, minimizing impervious surfaces, use standards of low impact development, underground utilities, exterior lighting, minimal impact to neighbors, buffer to neighboring properties, stormwater management, landscape plan including parking area designated for snow, adequate screened visitor parking, central trash and recycling area appropriately screened, and then one specific to 135 and 137 Orange Street, which is bus pull-off area and shelter.
I rated this one as highly advantageous. I think the site design in the proposals, as along with the buildings design, really reflected they're well designed. The site's well designed. It reflects a substantial amount of effort at this point to meet the requirements of the RFP, which included the landscaping plan, the lighting plan, exterior, stormwater management, pervious surfaces, the underground utilities, and in Orange Street, saving the large tree and the bus pull off and shelter. So I thought it really hit it on all of those.
I also rated it highly advantageous for the same reasons that Bernie outlined. I felt that the group really took time to look at the other landscapes of Nantucket and reading, building with Nantucket in mind and incorporating that into their designs.
I also gave it highly advantageous. I mean, I think the plans are well developed for the building placement, parking placement, landscaping, utilities, open spaces. I think it included all of the site design criteria with the exception of maybe the visitor parking. But that was kind of hard to tell on the plans, but it seemed that that was not included. But those are all tight sites with a lot of units. So that may be something for discussion later at the permitting phase.
I also, Brian, put it as highly advantageous. I thought Bernie's comments were kind of right on where it seems like they took a lot of time and care to pay attention to the details and really make sure that they were kind of hitting everything. Though, Leslie, I would have to double check because I don't know about the visitor parking either, which is, as we know, one of the biggest challenges is parking anyway, so.
I
Leslie?
went,
Go ahead, Tracy, I'm sorry.
I went highly advantageous on this. I did think about, similar to, Leslie on the visitor parking, at least a couple spots. I think, for the same reasons Bernie and Christy have noted, I love that saving the tree at Orange Street was incorporated. On Vesper in particular, I really like what looks like an interior walking path that goes in a loop. I thought that was really, really thoughtful for an over 55 situation. So that was it.
Leslie, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
With any exterior lighting, is there a way to tell if we would be complying with the dark skies bylaw?
Well,
Because, I mean, it does say in here, exterior lighting is minimal impact to neighbors, and if there is, would it have to comply with the dark skies bylaw that was approved at a town meeting or no?
yes, it would have to comply.
Okay. And we probably wouldn't be able to tell at this stage whether we would comply or not, correct?
We typically always designed dark sky. So while we
Okay.
haven't gotten to that level of detail, that would be the direction to our architects.
Okay, thank you. Just because I know that would eventually be a question along the way at some point. Okay, notwithstanding that question anyway, just because it comes up in everything else we hear about. I had it rated already as highly advantageous. I think for most, if not all of the reasons, I think being able to save the tree was very critical and something that we were very hopeful for. The bus stop creation was really incorporated, was really critical as well. And as I mentioned in my opening comment and rating, I think that the designs were all extremely thoughtful in the way that you laid them out. And I think a lot of time and effort went into it, and I'm really very happy with the outcome in all three of these designs. And I think you did a great job on the site designs and doing something that, as we move forward, hopefully in this process, that everybody would be proud of. So I rated it highly advantageous.
I too went highly advantageous on this. I do think it's going to be tight, but I appreciated the attention to the details and ensuring that they were keeping, like Christy said, building with Nantucket in mind, our tag phrase.
Okay. Sustainability is criterion number 8, which is the criterion to be evaluated on is energy efficient design and elevation level with coastal resiliency in mind.
Can I ask a question to the proponents?
Yes, you may. Absolutely.
All right. I didn't see in the package, but maybe I just overlooked it. Because for highly advantageous, it says that it exceeds sustainability and energy efficient goals, including a net zero energy efficiency. Are these buildings proposed to be net zero?
I
Um,
think so, right?
So I can't promise that they're net zero yet. Most of ours right now are, unless someone else on my team knows that we're able to do it, I think we haven't gotten to that level. I would say that all of our projects, all of our recent projects and the ones that we're all in planning for at Passive House designed and they get very close. I think we've done one that's net zero, but I don't know if I'd want to promise that they all would be there. I don't know, Craig, if you got any more detail from in the planning on this, then I would know.
No, I will say that, our intent is to go 100% electric, so no fossil fuels involved in this. The roofs are designed to be able to handle solar. We didn't fully flesh that out for this stage of the response.
Also
I know-
curious, sorry, Craig, I was just gonna say, also curious if the HDC allows solar on pitched roofs. Maybe you guys could let us know on that too. But sorry, go back to you, Craig.
Yeah. And then, the other component is, we've used it, or, one of our clients used it, where they purchased additional, solar capacity off-site to make up for whatever excess they had, or a portion of the excess that they had, in order to get full Passive House certification. So I think there's strategies that we can hit. A big part of being able to get to net zero is the solar capacity on site. And if that's verboten from the Historic District Committee, then we'll have trouble making it to net zero without doing some sort of off-site purchasing.
Right, so the HDC does allow solar on roofs, but it's subjective, just like all of their reviews. So, I would think probably at the Bartlett site, it's probably more doable than the Orange Street, Vesper, perhaps doable as well. But that's something that the elected commission has to discuss and vote on. So I can give you clear direction on that. So I would give this project, based on those responses, an advantageous rating.
I did the same. I had the same questions as Leslie about the net zero, and so for that reason, I rated it advantageous.
I had rated this highly advantageous, and but I wasn't certain on whether I maybe just had misread it or not read it carefully enough about whether achieving net zero had to be actual, sort of essentially a guarantee or a very likely kind of situation. I did feel that they made attempts to deal with many of the sorts of sustainability and energy efficiency items that you would in order to try to achieve that. Also was a little, with respect to the highly advantageous versus advantageous, it talked about highly advantageous. The proposal goes above and beyond to incorporate flood mitigation and additional coastal reliance resilience plan strategies. And I wasn't really sure I would have said above and beyond. And part of it was just because there just wasn't the specific details. And I didn't really expect that you'd have every single detail in there. But, it wasn't clear to me whether or not there was raised HVAC equipment, if there was basement ceiling, whether their basements, it said they were climate controlled. It wasn't clear if that was necessary even, or backflow valves, sub pumps, some of those things that are really pretty much very, very detailed. And I just didn't feel like at this stage, I expected to see that level of detail other than maybe the raised HVAC equipment. So that's the way I had it, at this, up till now.
Brian, I did the same, highly advantageous, but same with Bernie, where I think I might have been like giving the benefit of the doubt with some of the areas because I wasn't exactly sure.
Okay.
I rated this as advantageous, with the buildings being compliant with the stretch code, being all electric and Passive House aligned.
I had rated it as advantageous. I had the question about net zero and, so I think I think it was in the request for proposal that we put out, I think it was a goal of ours that it would be. So I had rated it as advantageous based on that, the lack of response in there, and certainly, they clarified it here, which I think continues to make me feel like this was advantageous in this area.
I went highly advantageous on this one, just because I appreciated the efforts that were made, but listening to all of your concerns, maybe I need to bump mine down a tad to advantageous.
Okay. Number 9. Exterior design and material, building design, I'm sorry. Building design, exterior design and materials is of high quality while remaining compatible with local historical design, including the use of historic colors, creative design that is cost effective and high quality. Interior layouts meet a variety of family type needs. Finishes support durability and low maintenance for tenant. Management office on site with storage. Adequate tenant dry temperature controlled storage, excuse me.
I have another question. Is there a management site on each, a management office on each site, or just one shared?
There's a management office at Orange Street, and it's been a while since I've looked, quite honestly, but I think there's one at Vesper as well, since that serves a special population being seniors. Bartlett does not have a management office at it, but it would be serviced by the one at Orange.
Okay. Well, I will give this one a highly advantageous. Thank you for those clarifications. I think this design of the structures, appear consistent with HDC standards. The amenities to be provided are energy efficient, and the layouts have a mix of bedroom counts. So I think you all did a great job.
I rated this as highly advantageous, citing that the plans meet the criteria for utilizing high quality materials without creating a cost burden to the project, and that all sites had a plan for an on-site temperature controlled storage area.
I also rated this highly advantageous for the same reasons.
I went advantageous on this, with just some like minor design components on the Vesper site of what might be like, for instance, ensuite bedroom, where the bathroom is more attached to the bedroom, just because I'm older and I appreciate that. And then on Bartlett, the only thing for me on Bartlett, and that this is a challenge with the permitting and the zoning, is that the building itself, although I love it and I think it's very well designed, when you take in the whole area as a whole, I just wonder if there's going to be pushback. But other than that, I think it is a really great design.
I had this as advantageous, with all of the positives that everyone has mentioned about the highly advantageous. I think they included the things that we were looking for with respect to the building design. I did focus a little bit on whether it's cost effective, which is a difficult kind of concept at this point, at this stage. I think it's just very difficult to say yes. It's very expensive, especially proposal 1 to the town, because that's especially expensive to the town. And we really just didn't have enough details, but we're already working through some of those. We've asked some questions, we've gotten some new information, so I haven't had a chance to go through that and evaluate whether I would, change this a little bit different. One of them was also, no prior up until this most recent set of questions and answers of whether or not panelized or modular construction was explored and whether it would be explored. So they did express an affirmative did express an openness to that. And there are a few minor things with respect to, interior space, but it's not a big deal. Those weren't the biggest things. It was mostly cost, which is difficult in today's environment. Still very good design. I definitely passed.
I had ranked this as highly advantageous. I thought it was, it definitely was a, very well thought out. I think it is cost effective and the designs are very well done. So I thought it met the criteria for, the highly advantageous mark. Shanta.
It looks like she dropped off. She
I think we lost her.
Oh. Okay. Well, this is probably where the most fun is going to be, right? On number 10, which is financial feasibility. So,
I'm happy to kick us off on this.
yeah, right. You might not want me to kick you off on this one, but financial feasibility, adequacy of proposed budgets, development and operating, appropriateness of rents in relation to market, track record of securing proposed conventional and subsidy financing, and no project subsidy from the town except for the contribution of the proposed land. Who really wants to go first on this one?
I don't mind.
Okay.
I mean, it was honestly really hard to rate this one, kind of given all of the factors of it. So the adequacy of proposed budgets, development and operating, I thought was highly advantageous. I think, their track record also on staying on budget on other projects. And reading more about affirmative, I think that all set me as highly advantageous. The appropriateness of the rents in relation to the market was great, and their track record of being able to secure additional funding was great. The request for nearly 40% of the project cost to come from the Affordable Housing Trust was not advantageous, kind of in line with the guidelines in the RFP. I did feel, though, that their overall expertise in being able to secure other funding sources might mean that down the road, ultimately the amount requested by the town could be reduced, or that we could look at the whole structure of it, and whether it's going to be grants or loans or some combination of both, to make the project both financially feasible, but to not kind of deplete the Affordable Housing Trust of the total funds they have available for all future projects. So because there was a mix of highly advantageous and then not advantageous, I rated this just as advantageous.
Brian, I maybe not to the level of detail Christy did, but I did feel like it was a mix. And so I also gave it advantageous. I mean, I think the big piece is, as Christy pointed out, just how much is being funded by the Affordable Housing Trust was just a concern for me. So
Sure.
I gave it advantageous.
And I gave this a not advantageous. I mean, I did think that overall it was an advantageous rating, but the 40% subsidy from the Affordable Housing Trust, I thought was just too much and kicked it into not advantageous category.
We also did not advantageous, similar reasons, but then also there's just so many unknowns. And then I did make a note that I felt like proposal 2 was more favorable. And so I just feel like there's too much outstanding for me, and that 40% is kind of hard to swallow. I also think the budget is a little bit optimistic. where we've been doing other projects and have seen how quickly that can change. I don't know how much of a cushion was put in there, but anyways, so I went not advantageous.
Shanta?
I think
Oh,
she's still gone,
off,
Brian.
okay. Okay, Bernie, do you want to go first? You want me to go? Because I'm sure you and I are going to talk the longest on this one.
So,
I'll go if you want first.
I rated it not advantageous. But I like others who rated it one way or the other. I struggled a bit because there was a huge amount of work that went into this. The team is very experienced. They demonstrated track record in affordable housing and LIHTC housing and making these deals like this work and happen. So I have no questions about their capacity and the overall team and the strength of the overall team that they've put together. It's a very hard standard. I did focus very much on the size of that, the amount of money, the percentage of the TDC that was funded by the town of 40%. And that was in, one of the proposals. The other was, I think, about 26%, would be much more favorable. These are complicated transactions. You've got a tremendous amount of back and forth with various funding sources. You've got to pull together all these different funding sources. So it's very difficult and very complex to make that happen. And so we've already asked some questions. We've gotten some recent answers on some of these. The other aspect that went into it was my evaluation of it, my rating, was really just the lack of enough detail to understand the differences between the two proposals. And already, we've started to get some of the answers to that, and we'll have some more questions. So that's really, the reasons why I rated it that way. We've seen costs. Costs were a little lower than what we're seeing in Tacoma. There's certainly could be reasons for that. And we know how costs continue to accelerate, throughout the country, and especially in an environment, an island environment like Nantucket. So those are the reasons for now.
Yeah, I kind of went back and forth for a lot of the reasons that Christy kind of articulated. Candidly, it's a very large ask from the Affordable Housing Trust, the town, and as I always point out, it's coming from straight from the taxpayers, and so I kind of lean toward not advantageous just because of the large amount. I struggled with the low amount of developer equity going into it relative to the ask from the town in terms of the 300,000 developer equity and the $18.8 million ask from the town. I settled on advantageous from the perspective that I think that the respondent and the certainly has a lot of depth of knowledge in both federal and state LIHTC programs, and has advanced projects with mass housing and other components of financing from the Commonwealth. So I think that they have an ability and an understanding how to leverage those programs. So I think there's an ability, depending on the will of the committee and depending on the proposal and depending on a variety of factors. We all know that this, it takes a long time to even execute a lot of these agreements. I still think there's an opportunity. But I think on this, at this stage, I could only get to advantageous, and I do that with some reservations. Like I said, just the ask is extremely large, and in a lot of respects, having seen a lot of the deals that have been proposed, I certainly understand it. Construction costs here are moved differently than the majority of the Commonwealth, so I understand it. But it's hard to wrap my head around almost $20 million from taxpayer dollars. So I did get to advantageous, but it was a little bit of a struggle at this point. Now, that's not to say as we review the additional information that Affirmative Investments has provided, that won't, make that a stronger case or change it even more. But at this point on the initial review, and Tara, we're probably going to have some additional requests for more in-depth pro formas that Hilltop is going to need to see to be able to adequately evaluate the proposals. So one thing I do want to explain now that Chantal's not here and I've given you what my rating is, just so you're aware of how we have to work with bond counsel if in fact we have to use financing for this, because we have numerous authorizations to borrow the Affordable Housing Trust. We have a limitation or a cap on how much we could provide to any project, and we have not done any analysis yet because of where we are. But I think Christy and I both believe it's probably a good idea to let you know how that metric kind of works. It's not cast in stone, but it's a rough idea, and it kind of gets maneuvered as we go through the process. But generally, from a very high level, we have to look at the market rate minus the affordable rate, and that delta over whatever period the town chooses to amortize the debt is essentially the amount of a subsidy that the town would be able to look at in total for the project. Okay, that typically is how bond counsel has looked at this for this, and I would just I put that out there for you so that you can kind of go back and look and even get an understanding. It goes through itinerations as we work with Hilltop, so I'm not saying it's set in stone perfectly right this as we go through this, but that's kind of how they've looked at this to be able to allow us to use taxpayer dollars and bond proceeds to be able to do this. So just so you have an idea of how we do this.
Sure, that's helpful. We can look at that again. We did come up with an analysis in our proposal of kind of how we thought you might look at it. And so that's written into both of the proposals, but it was kind of a guess. And we're not surprised, right, that we're not highly advantageous on this section. That doesn't surprise us at all. And that's partly why, but it is what it is, right, in order to get the workforce housing. And that's why we put in a second proposal. And I did want to just say, I don't know if that's causing you more headache or less. The reason we submitted both two separate proposals is we purposely didn't want you to get into a position where you couldn't grade us, right? Because you had two options. And so we did not mean to cause you guys a lot more grief, but we were trying to protect you by doing that.
No, I don't want to speak for the committee, but I'm glad you did, because it gives us two options to consider, and it gives us something to be able to look at. And I think, I personally believe that the majority of the differences in the committee's discussion is likely going to be on the project financing side more than anything, which is going to probably take a little bit of time for Hilltop to kind of parse through. But I'm happy that you went outside the box and thought about it and presented a second option for the committee to review and evaluate on a standalone basis versus one that, has a really big price tag to it. I'm glad that you thought and said, hey, here's another way we could do it, given our expertise and what we can do and how we've financed other projects. So for me as a committee member, I'm thankful. I'm not speaking for everybody else, but I don't mind doing the work on that second proposal, to be honest with you.
Thanks.
Same. I can say the same. I mean, it was very helpful to have two proposals, because if you did focus strictly on the focus on workforce housing and prioritizing workforce housing, obviously that took away an ultimate amount of subsidy from something else, and caused the town to have to put a lot more money into it. And so it was good to show the second proposal and say, with that different perspective and moving some things around, and how certain units would be classified and of course subsidized, there's a way to make that less of an issue. So, yep.
I think to the group, the last one is references and a potential site visit, which I'm going to recommend we stop at 10, just because we've lost Chantal. Rick isn't here and Dawn never made it. And come back. Has everybody read proposal 2 in our group?
Yes.
Does the entire group kind of feel like it's pretty similar? Are they on the, is everybody pretty similar with the exception of financing in terms of rating for it so that we could go through everything pretty quickly in another meeting? And is 2 more, we've got to go through Rick, I got to get Rick and Dawn's ratings and Chantal's got to finalize her, but what I'm trying to get to is, would it be better to just ask affirmative to give a presentation on proposal 2? Is that the likely option that the committee is going to lean to? And what does the committee feel?
I think a presentation on proposal 2 would be good.
I agree, Brian. I think based on everyone's comments on the financials, like I think everyone feels all the other stuff is very similar, and that was the real big sticking point of 1 versus 2. So I think in the best use of time, just a presentation on 2 would be best.
I agree. I basically rated for both and wrote notes of
Okay.
proposal 2. So
Mhm.
I would like to see proposal 2 presented.
Okay, so Tara, if the committee, after, I don't know that we can set a meeting now without the other members that aren't here, but would you guys in a couple of weeks be prepared to kind of present on 2, taking us through the whole thought process and the from all the evaluative criteria, and then taking us through the financing and how you envision all of that working and everything? Maybe like a 30-minute proposal or something, and then we can ask questions and then go back through that evaluative criteria, and I can get it caught up from the members that missed on 1, and we can kind of work through that way. Would that work for your group?
Sure.
So
Can I just
And we'll,
add-
yeah, just tell us on time because we, you know, obviously we'll want the architects there as well because it
Yeah.
sounds like you guys
Yep.
might have questions still there. Yep.
and I think I will I'll call you about some of the team concerns, just so you are aware of where they're coming from and what they are, just so you have an understanding.
Great.
Brian, I have a question. If they're doing the presentation on proposal 2, can they still talk about proposal 1?
Sure. I don't think there's a problem with that.
Okay, for me, it would be
go
really
ahead.
helpful to
Mhm.
understand the differences in the timelines
Sure.
based on different fundings. And as we always say, like, the longer the timeline, the higher the cost most likely would be. And so in the end, is it going to be a higher ask for the town, even if the initial ask is lower? And
Yeah.
so I just think it's worth vetting through kind of both financial proposals, if that's possible.
And I did have one question about on the timeline in the proposal, like Vesper being held out. I'd like a more detailed if that's a financial, more financial than anything else. But I think I liked the idea of them all being developed together.
Yeah, I agree with Tracy. I think a little clarity on that would be helpful. There's no issue with developing the projects as you know, so you can take advantage of economies of scale and that type of thing. I don't think anybody wanted to see them sort of developed building by build or site by site. There were just questions about the breakdown of the numbers so we could understand them. But there was, you know, in the answers, the questions and answers that we had, it said for proposal 2 in one place that it assumed that all of the buildings were going to be built at one time in one transaction. And then another place it talked about was going to be 30 months in which Vesper was hold out until later, that that Bartlett and Orange would be completed first and then Vesper would start. It was just confusing between the
It might
two.
have been confusing because we were writing two at the same time, but so
I
the,
get that. I know pulling together responses and proposals like this.
Yeah.
There's
we
a
can
lot
answer
of
that.
work.
Yeah, we can explain that and why Vesper was pulled aside on the workforce one. I'll have Craig explain that to you.
You understand
Okay.
separation, you have two owners and all that stuff, so yeah. Okay,
Craig, do you want to go through that? You want me to? Okay.
Oh, I thought that was part of the presentation that we're going to be giving, but yeah.
Oh, do you want that later? Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's
so
just
I'm-
as part of the
I'm-
presentation.
Oh,
think.
okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
sure.
that's fine.
So I think what we'll do is I'll send an email to the evaluation committee and we'll get a date when we can talk to everybody on the committee, and then I'll send it to you, and we'll make sure to give you plenty of time to put it together, Tara, for you and your team.
Great.
Okay. So with that, I certainly appreciate everybody's time, almost an hour and a half today to go through this. I think it was really good to go through it and see the proposal and hear everybody's observations. And I think that we made a lot of progress, which is good for the Affordable Housing Trust and certainly for the town. So with that, let me just see what else we had on this agenda that I crafted. We're gonna hold off on the next meeting till we can confirm with everybody's availability. So with that, I think we're at adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Bernie,
Aye.
Christie,
Aye.
Leslie,
Aye.
Abby,
Bye.
Tracy,
All right.
Brian is an aye. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Nice to meet
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.